Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of Friday Drinks. Thank you very much for the support. Last week was great. We were at ZNCC conference in Victoria Falls, and we met a number of you guys, and we got some really positive feedback. Thank you very much for that feedback. And today, as promised, we've got somebody who's very interesting. Tatsikwane province. Do you know the number of times that people have asked for you to actually come on the show?
Is that so? I didn't know.
Like continuously.
Yeah.
We're like, we want to find the right time
Yeah.
and the right place for you to actually join us.
Yeah.
Because, we felt like, there's so many things that you have to say,
Yeah.
and there's so much wisdom that you gained over the years
Yeah.
that our viewers could actually gain from.
Yeah.
So this is the particular occasion. And thank you very much for encouraging us to invite no longer honorable.
Yeah.
It's now just Tendai
Yeah.
Biti. How do we address you? Former ex-minister Tendai
Just
Biti.
Tendai Biti.
Just Tendai Biti. Well, thank you very much for coming over
Yeah.
and for joining us. A little disappointed that on the show, you insisted on having an orange juice.
Because you're not a teetotaler by any stretch of the imagination.
Actually, I am. I take some wine, but largely I'm a teetotaler.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I stopped drinking in 1994.
1994. What happened?
I used to, as a lawyer at Dun & Black, I used to work very hard, and then in the 90s, that was the time of the economic of ASAP. So I used to go to work on Saturday and Sundays. The only day I would drink was Tuesday evening. So I would go to a bar at Borodale, Sam Levy. It's now a bank. It's now Nedbank.
All right.
There was a keg in Sebo there.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I would sample these imported beers because during ASAP there were trinkets and so I used to drink like Foster's Lager, Carlsberg because they were available.
Okay.
And but on Wednesday it was court, and I would always be, as a junior lawyer then, I would always be in motion court. So I developed this self-conscious thing that even the judge can smell, me from like 5 meters away on the bench, court C. It's a big court where we do motion court. Okay. So one day I just said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just went okay. But I collect wines, particularly red wines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, you're a good host.
Yeah. Should come to my house.
Well,
I collect red wines, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So you're having an orange juice.
And you're also having an orange juice.
Yeah.
Well, nothing unusual. But tell us what you're having, Rufaro.
Well, this is always the more interesting corner. I recently discovered this fantastic incarnation of Lafroig that they call the PX cask. And it's just, it's sublime. It's just a combination of peat and sweet flavors that is
Sounds like an expert.
that is to die for. So, it's just unfortunate that you guys are unable to appreciate what's happening in this corner at this juncture. But I can assure you...
I'm sure the audience will join you.
I can assure you that Lafroig makes great peaty whiskies in general, and this is... they're innovating and they mix things up from time to time, and this incarnation is just sublime.
Okay.
Yeah.
And before we start, we've just lost one of the senior members of the law fraternity, Stanford Moyo.
It's a shock. I haven't quite come to terms with that. I mean, he's one of the best lawyers in our country, if not the best.
Well, now
He's a man of wisdom. He's a fair man, and he's got incredible knowledge. Incredible knowledge outside the law. So this is a huge loss for the profession. It's a huge loss for the country, but of course it's a big loss for his family. Sarah Moyo, I was at Dun & Black for 18 years. Sarah Moyo is now the senior partner there.
She watches the show, right?
Yeah.
She's one of our more religious.
So I
Watches,
know
yeah.
I know Stanford and Sarah very well. When I bought my second house some 15, 20 years ago, I became neighbors with Stanford and Sarah in Kambanje, Glenlawn. But of course, as a lawyer, I can't remember the countless summer schools we attended together at Troutbeck in Nyanga. And Stanford was constantly one of the, if you like, permanent infrastructure, permanent fixtures there. So this is a huge, huge, huge loss. And I can't imagine, it's surreal. So I'm in shock.
Yeah, he sat on a lot of boards. He was pro-business. He was pro-market. I mean, we engaged in a number of debates, and he came across as somebody who actually understood the market, which for a lawyer, I always find it
He
very...
understood. I think one of the things that the country will lose is he had developed this niche in mining law. And Zimbabwe has got over 63 resources. So his skills were so important in that field. The country is going through attempts to overhaul the Mines and Minerals Act. Yes. And there are two conflicting views, one which you don't agree with, one that says let's give land rights superiority over mining rights. So he had a pro-business, mindset that we should entrench mineral rights. So it's a huge loss to think that Stanford is one of those guys that some of us joined the profession. He was there, permanent furniture in the profession. So it's a huge loss.
And very engaging with old, new lawyers, everyone, across the different sectors.
Yeah, he had the respect of everyone. And he, both sides. Zimbabwe is a very polarized, country. So both sides of the political divide find, connection and chemistry with him. So that's and you could also use him as a sounding board. Mkoma Stein, I've got this. What do you think? So it's a huge loss. It's a huge loss.
Sad. Okay, so today it's going to be a little different. Like I was saying just before the show that, we've traveled to Nairobi, South Africa, and Victoria Falls, and everywhere we've gone, we tend to meet a lot of people who watch the show who are not Zimbabwean. Could be Kenyan, South African, and we usually get the same questions. So it's around the government of national unity, because I think that Zimbabwe, in some regard, has been leading as far as that is concerned. And this is a new creature that we're seeing right across Africa. And everybody's always asking, okay, so how do we manage these things? And high inflation. Remember, a lot of the African countries have not gone through high inflation. This is the first time. So, for example, interest rates in Kenya, it's 17%, 18%. This is the first time they're experiencing, in more than 3 decades where they're experiencing high inflation. So the question is always, so how do we manage high inflation? Similarly with Zambia, you can see the problems that they're having. I mean, they've been in talks for over 5 years and the economy has not moved because they're just continuously in talks. And we thought, the guy who has all the answers, or hopefully so, if not, we will push him along so that we get the real answers on just, finance ministry, treasury, and how that actually operates. So we've termed this, reflection and advice to African finance ministers that are actually out there, can watch this particular show and actually glean and learn a thing or two about your period in government. For those that don't know this, so this is just a little bit of background. Tendai Biti was actually the finance minister between 2009 and 2013. This is when Zimbabwe went through a government of national unity. Believe it or not, he was actually 43 at that time, and he was actually at the helm of treasury, which had absolutely nothing in the coffers. But by the time he left, it was a budget of around $4 billion, but 3.8 to $4 billion. But that's not the phenomenal thing that happened during that period. What happened during that period is actually the economic growth. So if you look at those particular 5 years, economic growth at that time averaged around 7%, about 7.6% over that 5 year period. But if you use today's prices, I don't know if you looked at it, you got the economy when the economy was $4.4 billion, and he left when the economy was 19 billion US dollars. So that's an average growth of around 66%. That's using today's prices. That's quite phenomenal. And I think in the history of Zimbabwe, that particular 5 year epoch would be one of our best ever. So I think there's good reason for us to claim it as one of our best periods, but there were a lot of challenges. And I can pick up one of the challenge which you did, which was to kick the can down the road, which is the debt issue, which we never really dealt with then. But these are issues we'll get into the details. But I just thought that that's a good enough background so that people understand why you're actually here. Is because there's a lot that we can gain from there.
So, okay,
Yep, go ahead.
Something that me and Tinashe discuss a lot, about the human condition and leadership is this quality gumption, just having the courage, the self-belief to take on really large challenges. And if we think about your appointment to the Ministry of Finance in 2009, we were coming off a period where we had lost 60% of our GDP over the preceding 10 years. And there were empty shelves. Civil servants were earning almost nothing. It was an absolute mess. And I think at the time, a very compelling case could actually have been made that one of the reasons why, in the GNU, you guys were given that portfolio of the Ministry of Finance. It was such a daunting task. Many believe that you couldn't succeed and you were kind of set up to fail. You're given this, incredibly difficult portfolio at the time. It was not, the challenges were nothing to sneeze at. So maybe, just for the purposes of, our curiosity and the audience, what made, and you're not an economist, you're not a finance person, but you accepted this challenge. You picked up the gauntlet. What gave you the confidence that not only was this something that you could take on, you could succeed. It would not consume you.
Yeah. Look, so the first thing that you need to understand was that Zimbabwe was in a big meltdown, as you know, as a Zimbabwean. By December of 2008, our inflation was 500 billion%. The second highest in the history of mankind, after Hungary in 1956. And you remember that by June of 2008, the central bank had stopped publicizing inflation figures because it has gone way beyond 1,000,000%. And the Reserve Bank had printed $100,000 trillion notes that could buy you 2 bottles of soda. And there was absolutely nothing in the supermarkets. There was nothing, but they were being made to open so that they didn't. So I was the chief negotiator for the MDC led by Morgan Tsvangirai, may his soul rest in peace. And so I negotiated together with Elton Mangoma, I negotiated the government of national unity. It was a long, arduous process, but during the negotiations, I felt that ZANU were not bona fide. I felt that, they just needed us to help them deal with 11 years of economic collapse from 1997 to 2008. So we reached an agreement. The final agreement was reached on the 24th of January 2009, with the agreement that the Prime Minister would be sworn in on the 11th of February, Ministers will be sworn in on the 13th of February, and the new government will start work on the 16th of February. So I actually disappeared. My wife was working in South Africa. So, I disappeared. So people didn't know where I was hiding. Changira didn't know where I was. But one of my friends sold me out, the location where I was in, somewhere in Four Ways in Johannesburg. So I spoke with President Changirai on my friend's phone, and he said, "Look, I know how you're feeling. You're feeling disappointed, but let's have a dinner." So we agreed to have dinner on a Wednesday, the day he was sworn in. Wow. Sorry, on Tuesday, the day before he was going to be sworn in. So that would have been on around the 10th.
Were you in hiding? So you didn't want to join the GNU?
I didn't want to join. And, I'd successful, practice at Han and Blackenberg. I was happy there. So
what were you negotiating if you didn't want to join?
Well, we negotiated to give people a chance, to give Zimbabweans a chance. Okay. Remember, there'd been violence, economic collapse, pauperization, and so forth. But it became clear that our colleagues in ZANU were not interested in that. Mm-hmm. But we're just finding a way of creating a soft landing to buy time in order to regain complete power, as they in fact did in 2013. Okay. So that's why I was running away. So I had dinner at some dirty Chinese restaurant in Avondale. It has since closed with Morgan. So just the two of us.
Who chose the restaurant?
It's closed, but it's close to Milton Park. So
okay, but who chose it?
Between you
and Morgan chose it.
So you have better taste.
Yeah,
you would have gone somewhere else.
Yeah, Morgan chose it. I probably would have gone to Alo or somewhere.
All right.
So we went, and he said, "Look, I'm offering you the job of finance minister." And then I said, it didn't take me by surprise. The reason why it didn't take me by surprise is that from 1994, I'd been removed. I was Secretary for International Relations in the party. So I was removed, and many at that time felt it was a demotion. So I'd been demoted to being Secretary for finance, for economics, in our party. And you recall that at the time I succeeded Eddie Cross, but our party was labor-based. Mm. So the trade unions and the working people didn't like him. They considered him neoliberal. Mm. That's Eddie Cross.
Yes.
So he had written an economic blueprint called Bridge, which we used in 2000. Nobody liked that. I was viewed as someone from the left, so they wanted a blueprint that spoke to the working people, yeah. All right. But I recruited one of the country's finest economists, Peter Robinson, in a committee, and we wrote this economic blueprint called Restart, which was well written.
So this was now 2005.
This is in 1994.
Oh, 1994.
So this is 2004.
2004.
Yeah, this is 2004. Okay. Yeah, remember we were only formed. Yeah, so this is 2004. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'd written this, and so I understood the issues. I understood the economics, and I've got an academic background in that. Somewhere along the lines, I'd done economics at A level. So that was my background. So I then said, look, Comrade President, I need to consult my family, so I'll come back to you. He says, but I need time because I'm going to the State House for swearing in at 11 o'clock. So you have to be in touch with me at 9 a.m. on Wednesday,
wow,
the 11th of February. So I consulted my family. And
is that political talk? Do you actually consult your family? We want to know the gritty details. Do you,
Yeah,
do you actually...
there were people
do you
that
say to
knew
your
what I was
wife,
going
or,
through.
Or,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
these are your close
I
buddies, your friends?
Yeah, and also, my close family knew how much I was and I'm attached to the law, that I
Okay.
breathe and ate the law, and how much to be such a displacement from me. So I would say my inner family didn't want me to go to government because I had a comfortable life, comfortable job. I was doing well in the courts. I was in newspapers every day. I was in law reports, doing big cases and so forth.
Okay.
So there were people that I needed to talk to. I actually wanted to drive to my mother's house. But when I opened the newspapers the following day, Changira had already announced. So it was...
Appointment.
Yes. And his entire cabinet.
Oh my gosh.
You understand? So it was fait accompli. There was nothing that I could do. And so I was sworn in on Friday. And if you see the pictures, I'm not ready for it. I didn't even have a haircut. My hair is unkempt. And,
Yeah, we need to look at the suit.
Yeah.
That's usually a giveaway.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's how I became thing. I had... so remember that the global political agreement was signed on the 15th of September, 2008. So, but the reason why there was a delay between 15th of September to 24th of January was that parties were haggling over
Details.
cabinet positions. Cabinet positions. But there were certain ministries that they had given us by September. And one of them was finance.
Okay.
Yeah, was finance. So I started thinking about it, that because how would we turn around this economy? So in longhand, I'd written a 4-page document that I called STEP,
Oh, really?
short-term emergency recovery.
Which you then implement in your first budget proposal.
So I'll come to that. So I had an idea that what was essential was to stabilize the economy. What was so essential was to deal with inflation that had reached...
That was crazy. Yeah.
and secondly, the availability of food in the supermarkets, because there was nothing. Third was the social services. Hospitals were collapsed. Remember, 4,000 Zimbabweans were dying every week in 2008. So I centered my plans around those issues. But when I get into government, I've always been confident. I've always been confident in myself, and part of the legal training that I went through, they make you understand. I don't think it's happening now, but they unlearn you. They make you. They teach you the law, but they also make you understand that you don't know the law. You are an imbecile. But what they do, they give you skills that you can hunt, you can search the law, you can research. So there is no ocean in Zimbabwe, but I can do a case in maritime law because I've got the skills to research and so forth. And some of my biggest cases,
interrogate.
Yes, some of my biggest cases are things that I didn't learn and I just researched. So because of those skills, so with the economics, I had some background, and of course I knew.
So maybe let's step back a bit and let's begin where it actually began, which was in Goromonzi, where you've already hinted that you actually studied economics at A level.
Yes,
but we know that you went to the UZ and you were part of the Marxist Society.
Correct.
At the UZ, and you actually wrote quite a bit as a Marxist. Economist. In fact, you called yourself an economist or sort at the time, but leaning towards Marxism.
We can forgive you for being seduced by Marx's idea. Ideas as a man in his early 20s.
We want to know, were you a creature of your time? or you were a creature of the thought process at that time?
Look, I know that I know that you don't like.
To put it mildly.
But you see, the thing. Firstly, I was a creature of my time.
Okay.
I went to university, late 80s, early 90s. So the country was very much leaned normatively to the left.
Yes.
So the country called itself socialist, although there was nothing socialist about it. When I went to law school, I fell into the hands of two Marxist scholars, the late Kempton Makamure, may his soul rest in peace, and the Kenyan scholar Shadrach Billy Otoli Guto, may his soul rest in peace. He died less than 12 months ago.
Oh,
in Johannesburg. So what they exposed us was political economy. And remember, Das Kapital is a book about the economy.
Yes.
It's about a book about the economy. And people will be shocked about how close Adam Smith and Marx are. They're interpreting the same things.
Yeah,
they're interpreting the same thing. How wealth is
created.
Is created.
Yeah, Marx was actually very good at actually articulating capitalism.
Exactly. Right.
But he had really awful ideas.
So I was exposed.
What to do?
Yeah, I was exposed to African scholars in Zolonga, and Dalancha, Fantu, Cheru, people with an intimate and intricate knowledge of Das Kapital and how wealth is created in a dialectical sense, if you like, contradictions, base, superstructure, and so forth. And I think that helps in understanding how the world works.
Just to help us, are you saying at the UZ with your lecturers, there were no pro-capitalist lecturers? So how come they didn't appeal to you?
Look, it's a battle of ideas. This was new. This was fascinating. You understand? Whereas the old traditional stuff, So this was fascinating. This was
revolutionary. Was like, okay.
Can you imagine reading, Engels, the origins of the family state and property, reading Engels and Turing and so forth, reading Lenin 1901, what is to be done?
It was sexy.
The Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks,
No, it's seductive. It's really interesting.
Very seductive. And remember, it's very intellectual. And then I got exposed to the Trotskyite, Tony Cliff from the United Kingdom. Very seductive, very seductive political economy. But anyway, to come back to 16 February, I got, and I always tell this story. I get into the office. It's a long, narrow office. You've been to the Minister of Finance. So it's to the Minister's office, a long corridor. Yeah. So people were peeping indoors. All the doors were open just to see this monster. If you've read Joseph Conrad, The Art of Darkness, when Mr. Cates goes to that office to seek a job to go to Africa, people are looking at him. Are you crazy? You're coming here.
Who's this madman?
Who's this madman? You want to go to Africa? That was exactly the same. But anyway, a few minutes, and there was no one to welcome me. I actually phoned Chinamasa. We had been acting Minister of Finance. Okay. I said, Chinamasa, we need to do a handover takeover. He says, Biti, I'm in a bank. You're a man. You find
you'll figure it out.
Yeah. But I phoned him. So anyway, a few minutes later, the permanent secretary, Willard Manongo, comes in. The then director of budgets, Pfungwa Kunaka, who is now the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Mines, comes in. Says, Minister, welcome, etc. So we exchange pleasantries. Then he says, but tomorrow is payday. I said, how much do we have to pay a gentleman? He says, $30 million US. So I said, how much money do we have in the bank? We've got $4 million US. So I say, but where are we going to get the $26 million US? And they say in unison, we're waiting for you, sir. And this is true. This is true. So so when they left, I went on my desk, and I actually started praying. I said, God, you even brought me here to fail. I mean, where am I going to get the $26 million? And I knew the economic crisis because I lived with it. I lived with it.
But Biti, just help us to understand, why would it be your concern and not the PEMSEC's concern? Because you're a policy hawk, and the bureaucrat, the PEMSEC, is the one who's the CEO of the treasury, who should know where the money should be.
I think at that time, the staff, the bureaucracy in the ministry had become so disempowered. Remember, a lot of their responsibility had actually been moved to the central bank. So they've been reduced to innocent bystanders. I found a ministry psychologically battered and butchered. They were excellent people there, Manungo, fine economists, fine gentlemen. So I found 6-7 bureaucrats, excellent bureaucrats. The accountant general, the late Judith Majorera, fantastic, bureaucrat. But they'd been butchered because they could see things going awry. They could see theoretically that we can't do this thing, but they were powerless to stop that because politics
had moved to the central bank.
It taken over. So they were disempowered.
Okay.
That's why they were able to say to me, but we were waiting for you because and part of my job was actually to restore confidence and to say, look, these are your powers in terms of the Public Finance Management Act.
So continue, you make the prayer.
Yeah. So I then realized that I needed a plan. I then realized that I needed a blueprint. I needed a canvas. So that very same day at 5 p.m., we started working on the document that would later be, that we worked on it for 2 weeks. By 25 February, we had drafted the short-term emergency recovery program. And I took it to South Africa to see President Zuma, who was going to take in a few months' time as the president of South Africa. The acting president was going to come in as president.
Sorry because the details are very important. Not just interesting, but very important.
Yeah.
Because on the 11th of February, Mugabe and Morgan had already pronounced that civil servants were going to get something.
In fact, it was the prime minister. So what happened, if you recall, the prime minister gets sworn in. The prime minister it's Wednesday. So when the prime minister gets sworn in, as a party, we celebrate by going to Glamis Arena. Because this is a big thing.
Yeah. You guys had been outside in the cold for a long time.
So there are thousands of people there. And in his excitement, the prime minister says, I'm going to pay you $100. But he doesn't even know how much money is in the coffers and where it's coming from. So I've got a double whammy. And then, of course, remember there was something called the voucher.
Yes.
The government had started paying people in vouchers, but you would only get $40. $60 would come in goods. You'd get some stuff from Spa and so forth.
Yeah.
And I knew that this must be eliminated as a matter of urgency. In fact, in the first cabinet meeting we had on the 17th of February, I said, look, Mr. President, I'm going to scrap the voucher. Then they said, but why are you scrapping? Then I said, we can't print money. We can't print the US dollar. We are in where we are because of broad money, because of printing. So we can't do that. So they then said, then you go and have a press conference. So the first press conference of the Government of National Unity was on Tuesday, the 7th, which I held in the Treasury boardroom, hosted and flanked by the Minister of Information, Webster Sham. And this is where I was then asked by a journalist, but you've paid some civil servants, you're going to pay some civil servants. Where have you gotten the money? He said, Takia Kia. And that's where the name came from, Takia Kia. But so I knew I had to scrap that. I knew I had to scrap the
where is it coming from? Is it intuition? Because what you're saying is those vouchers were actually inflationary because it is money printing, some form of money printing.
No, I understood.
Where was it coming from? Is it intuitive, common sense, or is it because you actually understood what money is?
I actually understood.
Okay.
And I had this drive that, because I'd watched what was happening and how the economy we'd been destroyed by quasi-fiscal activities.
Okay.
So I knew that this just had to
stop.
to go. So we started working on step that Monday. So the ministry officials.
Okay.
But I phoned Peter Robinson. He was in London.
Okay.
I said, Peter, come and help me. I need this blueprint. So I had my ideas, those ideas that I had written in September. So Peter and Dan Glera would sit.
You just tell us who were your advisors. So you had Peter Robinson. Who else? Daniel Ndela.
Daniel Ndela, yeah.
Was a UNDP economist.
Yes.
He had worked
Yes.
in
Then
development. He's a development economist. I believe.
yes, yeah.
And then who else?
Then Patrick Bond.
Patrick Bond was at
Professor
Wits.
Patrick Bond
Yeah.
at Wits, yeah. So they helped me frame a step.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why
but
did you choose those particular three economists?
Because I'd worked with them before.
Okay.
Yeah,
Where?
I'd worked when I was made secretary for they were
okay.
in my committee.
All right.
Peter and Dan. But Patrick is a long-standing friend.
Okay.
And Patrick did his, as you know, Patrick is an American scholar, or
Yeah.
well, you can call him that. But he did his PhD on Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And he published an important book called At Even Zimbabwe on international finance capital from 1890. And it's a very interesting book because he follows the slums and booms of the Zimbabwean economy and why that happened. Yeah. So I helped him during that PhD thesis. One of the things he needed to understand was Bernard Chidzero.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did for him was to read all Bernard Chidzero's novels and then try to connect.
This is when you were actually at the UZ,
I was
right?
at the UZ.
Yeah.
A young boy at the UZ.
Okay.
Yeah. So
You and Larry Mavima, right?
yeah,
he was
Atham
also-
Tambara.
And Atham Tambara as well.
Atham Tambara. And,
Okay.
Yeah. So I knew Patrick, very well.
Okay.
Yeah. And Patrick is an excellent editor. So Patrick's role was, we've done this thing, please edit this thing for us because it's excellent. But I also had fantastic economists. The late Eraya Hamandishe is late.
Yeah.
And we call him Sekuru Mushai. He's still in government, but I believe he's in Washington, D.C. So those were the principal desktop economists at the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
Who were, so I was the coordinator. So we produced this document.
And
So-
just
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, what's interesting to me is the fact that in this cohort, you don't actually have a captain of industry, somebody who was leading a significant corporation or had built a significant business, who had been on the ground through all the madness, who probably had some ideas about how we could turn things around. It seemed like you had a very academic specialist.
Left-leaning?
Well, I don't know whether they're left-leaning or right-leaning.
They're more left-leaning.
In terms of them,
Except maybe Daniel.
but
Yeah.
Well, what strikes me from what you've described is that it wasn't your natural disposition to reach out to actual people in business at the time, or maybe you did and they turned you down.
No. Well, look, remember, business works with organizations. So there's MCOs. There's the
CZI.
CZI,
ZNCC.
and they produce so much literature on the direction of the economy. The UNDP. Through the Ministry of Economic Planning, it also produced some blueprints. So there was no shortage. We knew what needed to be addressed, and of course, you didn't have to be a genius that you need to address the inflation in Zimbabwe. So you need to deal with both the supply side and the demand side of inflation. So. I had no doubt that what we were doing was carrying everyone. And there were three things that were clear to me. The The first one was that the Zimbabwean dollar, or rather its printing, had destroyed our economy. The budget deficits, or rather how the budget deficits were monetized, it destroyed the economy. So I had to bury the Zimbabwean dollar, which is what I did in Parliament when I revised the budget and presented the revised budget on the 17th of March 2009. I said, we are burying the Zimbabwean dollar. And each time I addressed whether a business conference, people would say, but you're going to bring the Zimbabwean dollar. And I would say, but you want me to jump from 80 Samora Machel, the Reserve Bank building, to prove that, I'm not going to introduce. The second thing that I was very clear on was that we had to live within our means. I had to maintain a strict regime of
Cash budgeting.
Cash budgeting. That's when I came with the expression, we eat what we kill. We eat what we kill. And I popularized that.
And this is the politician in you, because now you can explain it to other politicians. Because if you say cash budgeting in Parliament, I don't think that half the parliamentarians would understand.
I won't say it's the politician in me. I think the advantage I have, because I'm not a professional economist like you two guys, I can then verbalize your technical regressions, ceteris paribus, your modeling in ordinary simple language. I can deconstruct it, which possibly I can't do with the law, because I'm stuck with that. But with economics, I can do that, so that my Ezra,
you can be very creative.
In Lotito can understand that. So the issue of the cash budgeting was very key. The third key issue that was very key was that we had to give money to the social services. So we didn't have a lot of money. We started off January, we collected $4 million. February, we collected 15 million.
Just to give context, Chinamasa had actually given a budget before.
Yes.
And
of
1.7 billion.
Yes.
And then you come in and you say, there's no money, guys. I'm cutting the budget to $1 billion.
Yeah. So I first...
That has never actually happened in Zim, where the revision is actually downwards.
Yeah.
Well, usually it's upwards.
I first, I have to say these anecdotes because they're true. The theme of STEP was making Zimbabwe work again.
Sounds very familiar to...
Yeah. So when I presented that to cabinet, none of the ZANU-PF colleagues attacked the substance. But just that slogan, why are you saying making Zimbabwe again? Are you saying it was dysfunctional?
I can understand. I can understand that.
Sekeramai. Was it, Sydney Sekeramai? Okay. Why are you saying Zimbabwe, making Zimbabwe again? Your Excellency, is he saying that it was not functioning and so forth? So I just quietly said, it's making the economy work. And surely, Your Excellency, if inflation is 500 billion %, it's not working. If we've had for 15 years negative growth rates, it's not working. So that battle was won. The second battle, they didn't want me to reduce the budget to 1.7.
To 1 billion, you mean?
To 1 billion.
From 1.7.
It was like I was saying, marking them and saying, what we've done is rubbish. I said, but look, we're never going to collect this money. In fact, we didn't. We collected about $975 million in the first year.
Sure.
Yeah, said we couldn't, but they didn't like that.
So what is your view on government in general in terms of its role in an economy? Are you libertarian leaning in that you believe government should be as small as possible and as much as possible should be done by the private sector, or you actually believe that government has a very important role to play in providing a social safety net and providing welfare? Where do you lean philosophically in that conversation?
see, one of the ironies about my experience in government is that the practical reality of government is a huge machinery. Makes you moderate your views, actually pushes you to the center, actually pushes you to the center. So in some ways, I became very conservative. One of the things that I dogmatically stuck my guns was that we can't spend what we
don't have.
And
you actually produced a balanced budget, which is very difficult.
And we can't borrow. I refuse to issue, treasury bills. I refuse. I said, look, we'll manage with our with the resources.
Of your advisors, of everyone who was whispering this to you, or we had a similar sort of, because you would have had the debates, and we want to get into that. When you're having debates with your advisors, with the bureaucrats, with business, with everybody, how did you manage these debates, and how did you then come up with that as
the culture?
a common
The
view?
culture that was there, which regrettably is the culture now. Now as we talk, is that if the minister or the president says we are paying for X, then it doesn't matter whether there's money or not. We have
pay
to
for
pay.
X.
So the executive is powerful. So there's no discipline. So one of the things that we actually came up with cash budgeting rules. And one of the things that we were in those written rules was that if because the minister is not the paymaster, you don't even know where the bank accounts are. You're not even a signatory. The two principal characters are the secretary, who is the paymaster general in terms of the law, and the accountant general, who knows where the money is coming from. So those two are essentially the signatories to the government accounts. So we came with one of the agreed positions was that we don't spend any money unless it's in the blue book and it has been budgeted for. So if the budget says we're going to buy 40 cattle and we have to buy 60 cattle, we can't allow that. And in fact, the public finance management system that was put, the software that was put with the assistance of the African Development Bank will actually refuse to enter. Yeah. So when you see the Auditor General and you see these unapproved expenditures, which are euphemistically referred to as unclassified, you must know that it's being done outside the system, because the PFMS system is very. Then we also came to the agreement that there will be penalties for any officer who authorizes unauthorized expenditure.
Okay.
And I said to them, look, I know you've worked with these people. I know you fear them. So blame everything on me. Just say if the minister doesn't want and so forth. And so sometimes I would get calls to say, look, please, can you approve this?
Allow this.
Yeah, I'll tell you this short story. One day I was during the GNU, I used to play golf just to relax. So I'm playing golf but I used to leave my phones in
Changing rooms.
In my car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I used to play with a kid called Gift from Heathcliff. And it also shows the power of the intelligence system. So I don't have my phone. I'm about to hit a shot on the 10th floor. The kid's phone Gift rings. It rings.
Yeah.
So he answers the phone. I says, it's for you. And I answer, it's Michel Spanda, the chief secretary to cabinet. I always say, look, you used to call President Mugabe Vakuru vari kufamba. So Vakuru vari kuti mari yamavapai haisi kukwana. So yamangobatsira vadhara, So we put that into play to ensure that we're strict to cash budgeting.
So with the benefit of hindsight, right? Because I think at some point you had created some credibility in treasury, right? and we have arrears in terms of our debt. A case can be made that if you had chosen to, you could have issued 10, 15 year treasury bills and restructured the national debt, taking us out of arrears and opening up our fiscal space so that we can raise long-term debt to fund infrastructure and other things that we needed to do on the capital side, which we really didn't do for most of the GNU, because throughout the GNU, 90% plus of the expenditure was recurrent. We didn't actually invest in long-term projects. And one of the things that debt is useful for, especially if you get the tenure right, you can raise money that's payable in 10, 15, 20 years, and you can deploy it on these long-term projects. So when you look back, and especially now, it's become topical again, this infrastructure thing and how we're funding the roads. You had an opportunity to raise long-term money, restructure the debt, and fund, long-term capital projects. When you look back with everything that's happened, would you stick to your guns and say, nope, it was the right call not to issue TBs? Or would you actually consider issuing long-dated paper to restructure the debt and fund infrastructure?
Look, I think what we did was right. One of the things I was dealing with was a culture. A culture of extractive expenditure, unaccountable. So I had to change that culture. I had to instill the philosophy that we can actually live within our means, and we need to live within our means. So I didn't want to touch debt. So I had to create that culture. But more importantly, one of the things you must also understand is that, and you understand this, it's not enough just to have money. So you can give our government, this government, you can give it $1 billion today. If you come back next year, they will not have spent it on capital projects. We experienced this with the $500 million SDR that we got in 2011 from the IMF. So what I did was I used $200 million of that. I left $300 million, which is what they were holding on as reserve. So $200 million, I actually allocated it for gross capital formation. We completed the Doshon Nyabukunkomo airport. We built this term, Wenimbi, Gwaishangani, and so forth. So we did some infrastructural projects. But by the time, and this was managed through the Infrastructural Development Bank of Zimbabwe, Chikaura, and his team. By the time that the GNU ended 3 years later after disbursement, not more than 40% of that money had been used. So a low capacity country in a fragile environment has actually low levels of absorption of gross capital, formation. And I learned that very quickly.
Because you don't have the taxes, you don't have the tax base to pay it off. But I actually think that what you did was right, is you actually had the South African Development Bank building roads. You had private sector actually coming in to plug in that gap.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Not government itself doing it.
But I wanted to resolve the issue of our unsustainable sovereign debt, which was more than 130% of GDP, largely consisting of about $2 billion that we owe to the World Bank, $600 million to the African Development Bank, and then the bulk, about $5 billion that we owed to the Paris Club of lenders. We hardly owed anything to the Chinese. It was actually less than $200 million, unlike now. So one of the first things that I did, you remember Zimbabwe had been suspended. Zimbabwe's voting rights had been suspended
at IMF.
At the IMF, yeah. So one of the things that I worked so hard 2009, 2010 was to lift Zimbabwe's voting rights. So we got them lifted exactly a year after the inception of the Government of National Unity on the 17th of February, 2010.
When you had actually paid off what we owed the IMF.
Well, they were not interested in the payment. Okay. It was getting the it was getting the economics right. It was
All right.
getting the.
Okay.
Remember, we
Were you on an SMP? You never were on
I
an
had two SMPs.
Two SMPs,
Yeah, I had
okay.
two SMPs. In fact,
It's a staff monitoring program for
Yeah.
the benefit of the audience.
so in fact, what happened was that the longest debate and the biggest fight we had in government was the fight over HIPIC.
Yeah. Okay. We might as well get into
Yeah,
it because we're now there.
was the fight over HIPIC. Because I said to my
So
colleagues,
HIPIC is an acronym for basically highly indebted.
Highly Indebted Poor Countries Program.
Yeah, where the Paris Club writes off the debt of poor countries.
Exactly. But for in return of good hygiene, both at an economic level, at a macroeconomic level, and also at a political level.
Okay.
Yeah. So it involves two stages. The first level, which is basically you pass the economics. So they give you an upper tier SMP. And if you tick all the quantitative and qualitative targets, you qualify now to go to round 2, which is politics. Are you having free and fair elections? What's your balance
Governance.
sheet on
Yeah.
your governance issues, corruption, and so on and so forth?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole of the ZANU-PF bench came and said, look, this is a neoliberal program. You can't call us highly indebted because we are not
highly indebted. We're not a poor country.
we're not a poor country. And someone did, one of the ministers came with a document that proved that with billions and billions of dollars worth of minerals. So we're
We're a rich country.
We're not poor. We're not poor. And I remember sitting in my car. We finished around 7 p.m. and I had a notebook which I was writing in red.
Okay.
Ticking chombo. They were very
Ardent that we're not poor, that we have.
But Mugabe was very smart. He was with me, but he couldn't openly say
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what he did was he then appointed a subcommittee on that issue.
Who was in that subcommittee?
It was chaired by Arthur Mtambara,
Okay.
by one of the
All
deputy
right.
prime
So
ministers.
Arthur was there. Who else?
So what Mugabe did was he took the hawks. So 3 or 4 of the hawks were in it, and then those that were
In support.
Yeah.
Okay. So who were the Hawks?
Chombo was very vocal. Chombo was extremely vocal. The late Minister of Foreign Affairs was extremely vocal.
Mbeki. Mdenge. Okay.
Yeah, was very vocal. That you want us to go and beg for money from the West when they've imposed sanctions on us.
And then who else?
Maimchena.
Okay. Olivia.
Mchena, yes,
Mchena.
Thembi
Okay.
Sonyoni, yeah.
And then
So,
on the other side?
Elton Mangoma was in that committee.
Okay.
Myself, I think Ebuza was in that meeting. But anyway, we came up with this document that essentially agreed HIPIC. But to manage the politics, it then linked the issue of sanctions to HIPIC. That when you are negotiating HIPIC,
You can then negotiate.
Yeah,
removal of
but I
sanctions,
say to them, look, HIPIC is your best way of negotiating sanctions because you have to deal with the politics and so forth. So we came up with this document called ZADS, the Zimbabwe Accelerated Arrears Debt and Development Strategy, ZADS.
Okay.
Yeah. So I then approached the World Bank. The first problem was that we were classified as a middle income country. But of course, our statistics didn't support that. So I then say to them, do a desktop analysis and send us back to a low income, remove us from it. Because remember, HIPIC is only available to low income countries and not here. So they actually did that. And on the 17th of June, 2013, they wrote me to say, we have reclassified you as a low income. But as you can see, that 17th of June 2013,
You're on your way
July's
out.
elections. So I didn't have time to.
But you know, what's important to note, especially when you look at now the data arrears, is that HIPIC was a much easier route to have taken.
Look, my argument about number one, Zimbabwe is a poor country. we can't. You were talking about creating instruments, long-term instruments. But why should I create long-term instruments to create debt that is stale? $2 billion to the World Bank. Why should I pay $2 billion to the World Bank? Why should I pay $5 billion to the Paris Club of Lenders when there's a mechanism
To just to make it go away.
to make it go? And that mechanism simply requires hygiene. And so if someone is going to pay me to bath myself and to have
hygienic,
a haircut, what's wrong with that?
And they're good presidents.
Yeah.
I mean, you had
Because remember,
Nigeria.
I don't need
Ghana.
the IMF to tell me that inflation is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't need the IMF. So if I'm going to be rewarded for dealing with my own challenges,
Why not?
Why not?
What was the conversation with Mugabe? Especially on HIPIC. We'll get into the general, your relationship with Mugabe, but on HIPIC, when you were introducing this idea of HIPIC, and I like the example, and I suppose that's why you are the lawyer that you are.
Yeah,
is
so
hygienic.
this-
These are hygienic matters.
Yeah. So what you see, navigating a government of national unity is important
Okay.
because it's a complex creature. Remember, you are bringing together erstwhile opponents, enemies. In the case of Zimbabwe, enemies. We went into the government of national unity in 2009. Thousands of our people had been killed in 2008. A lot of our colleagues, like every Zimbabwean, we'd gone through Kukura Wunti, we'd gone through Operation Murambachina. And so it was a very polarized government, full of suspicions and so forth. So one of the things that I quickly learned was to understand the levers of power. So I understood that Mugabe had absolute power in ZANU-PF, and that he was the sole center of power, sole center of power. But I also
So are you saying that the army didn't have, and all the other guys that we've been told,
they deferred to him. They deferred to him.
Okay.
They deferred to him.
All right.
They deferred to him. So what I insist, Mugabe didn't regard the economy as important. So on Monday, you would have meetings with his information people and security people, but economics was nowhere.
So that's the order of priority. So Monday was security issues.
So I had to force him to have a mandatory meeting on Wednesday. Monday afternoon, you will have tea with the Prime Minister at 3 p.m. So I had to force him to make Wednesday a permanent day that we would meet. Those meetings were very interesting because, number one, I made it a point to, because I knew he was old, to not to hide anything from him and to put the difficult questions first. So I'm trying to do this, or we have to do this. And when he's alert and so forth, you move. But to be fair, we would do that, but he liked history. So we would end up discussing, the liberation struggle, his first girlfriend. It's true. It's true. Yeah.
When was his first girlfriend?
Well, when you read Edgar Tekere's book,
The girl in Highfield.
Kambuzuma.
Kambuzuma.
Yeah, Kambuzuma. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Tekere says, when I went to collect Mugabe, so that I would go to Mozambique, I saw him climbing the fence coming from this girl. and Tekere says, I never liked Salim Mugabe because he liked this girl. So I'd ask him about this girl. Then he said, happy to a tongue. So that's what we would discuss. And then he liked food. Mugabe, liked food. He was a culinary expert. And I think he probably had 3 or 4 chefs.
Okay.
A Chinese chef, Western chef, and
in State House.
At State House. So when you are talking to him, there is a constant supply of food.
Okay.
So you say that this thing is an apple crunchy cake. It's very good. It's very. So you'd go into a monologue
about
food.
Dessert.
about the lamb curry. And I'll be looking at my watch and saying, I need to go, Yeah. So at the end of the day, he appreciated that I was a hard worker. He appreciated that. And one of the things he actually told me.
So are you saying he warmed up to you later on, or it was at the get-go?
Very early. Yeah,
Is it because he just liked you?
I think he understood that,
Okay.
I was hardworking, because at some stage he actually cautioned me against working hard, because I used to leave the office around 11. She said, don't do that. Learn to delegate. I know you are a lawyer. Yeah. But the biggest the compliment he ever passed me was very early on the 29th of March, 2009. Okay. So I took step, the short-term emergency.
Yeah, that was a week earlier, because that was on the 18th of March.
When I presented it.
When you presented it in Parliament.
In Parliament.
Yeah.
Then on the 29th of March, at Losita Palace in Swaziland, there was a SADC summit to raise money for Zimbabwe. So I was asked to present SMART to heads of state. To heads of state. So I think they were used to people who would be reading, and ministers would be whatever. So I presented from the head, giving figures, giving whatever. So Mugabe then says, that's our Minister of Finance. We thought he was a lawyer. He didn't know anything, but he's actually brilliant. And I said, what?
Well, he said this in front of people.
In front of head of state.
Okay.
Yeah, in front of head of state. That was the biggest compliment he ever paid me. So I learned that with Mugabe, carry the hard stuff to him, win the fight with him, because eventually those ministers would go to him and they would also see his body language. Mugabe communicated through body language. A little shuffle here, his colleagues would know
what it meant.
Okay. What it meant and so forth. But with the HIPIC thing, I had to win it in the plenary of.
So when you introduced HIPIC to Mugabe, what did he say? You said he wasn't interested in economics. He didn't understand that argument, or he knew that this was more an international relations argument.
Let me just say the one amazing thing, even though he had degrees in economics, the one shocking thing that betrayed that he didn't understand economics. I would go to him and say, we don't have money. You understand? We've got a problem. And he said, but how can you say we don't have money? We've got these diamonds, we've got these mines and so forth. I said, Comrade President,
in treasury,
that wealth has to be created. Take platinum, you need $300 million to which you have to plow. So there was a disconnect that a government can one day in 2011 we had $223 left in our accounts. So I made the mistake of publicly saying this to the press. We only have $223.
Yeah.
And Mugabe was furious. Yeah, he actually beat me up because we had a cabinet meeting. So Mugabe would, the cabinet office is over.
When you say beat me up, you mean he had a book and
you had beat me up. He assaulted me. What happened was that when he gets into cabinet, we all stand up.
Okay.
So we all stand up. And then he goes greeting people. Then he comes the other way. So by the time you would have spoken to everyone, how are you? And so forth. So he comes to me and says, he took it very, personally.
Okay.
He took it very, personally. But we had another fight as well. He went to Mtari. He addressed a rally, and said, the reason why you farmers don't have money is that Biti is denying me money. Denying. But I kept him fully abreast. So the following Friday, the National Security Council used to meet on Fridays.
Okay.
And then I made the mistake, the newspaper, which he had there. So I threw it in his face and said, Mr. President, how can you say this? But the soldiers, the generals, didn't know that I had a special relationship with this old man.
That you could do that.
So they got angry on his behalf.
Wow.
And that weekend, my house was actually bombed. I'm not saying they did it, but there was a bomb in my house. 2 Poland Way, Glenlond. My house was actually bombed. The marks are still there. And I suspect these people didn't understand that I had a very close relationship with this old man.
So talking about the close relationship, and I want us to discuss this, right? This is an allegation. and this is the platform in which we can actually discuss this. So there was a reshuffle. Morgan Tsvangirai actually wanted a reshuffle, and you were going to lose your job as finance minister. And it is alleged that actually it was Mugabe who came to your support. And the allegation is part of it was tribal. And we then will go into tribal, but this story, how far true is it?
It's very true. And the person who actually told me this before the thing was Elias Mudzuri.
Okay.
So he used to play golf with the prime minister. So he comes to me and says, "You need to go and see the old man." Why? He says, "There's going to be a cabinet reshuffle." So I didn't even think about it. I didn't even take him seriously because that minister is so delicate. You understand? It's so delicate. That defense and the foreign affairs are really the country. The government is foreign affairs, defense and economics. Yes, there's justice. Yes, there are the social ministries. So I didn't believe that was happening. And with so many things in the thing. The thing about government is that it takes the average minister 3 years to understand his ministry, and by that time you're almost
done.
Yeah, almost moving forward.
Moving on. Yeah. I was lucky that I understood the ropes, quite quickly. Yeah, quite quickly. Yeah. So eventually I learned that yes, that was true because a very strong ZANU-PF faction then said, "But this can't happen."
You have to say who. This is in the past, so this is now history. But we want to learn. Remember, the reason why we're doing this is so that people can actually understand that these are the things that actually happen in government, and we need to learn. So whoever is getting into this position, they also need to understand that this is how politics and economics actually
I'll tell you about the conversation that took place between the Prime Minister and the President.
Okay.
When the Prime Minister presented his position, the President then said, "Look, there are ministries that we can't just change, because of their importance." Then number two, and I think this is the argument that carried the day. Even though the GNU says this one appoints, there are certain ministries that now belong to the whole country,
the collective,
to the collective, and the Minister of Finance belongs to the collective. So we have to agree on that position. So that's how it was killed, and reshuffles were
You're not gonna get away with it. Which faction supported you? Which one said, "You know what, Biti, we are going to give you our support so that this..."
At that time, I didn't know all these things.
Yeah. That's the reason why we're having this.
I didn't know all these things. Yeah. So it's not like it was a a real time conversation.
Sure.
Yeah. Even the knowledge that there was an attempt to reshuffle comes post facto, comes way after
the fact.
Comes way after the fact. And I know that Joyce Mjuru was very adamant that, look, you can't do that.
Okay.
And other ministers but across the
aisle,
the aisle, said that. But
we need them.
Yeah.
So now this begs the question of tribalism, because there was an allegation, and I'm using this as a case study. Not that it's the only one, but there are many cases like this. But this where tribalism actually raises its ugly head, where it's said that the reason why Joyce Mjuru, why Mugabe supported you is because of the tribal connection. That is what carried the day.
I can't comment on that for the simple reason that I want to say what was going through me at the time.
Yeah, please.
So at the time, I'm a born location. I grew up in the townships, so I'm totally detribalized. And I only built my rural home in 2013. I didn't have a rural home. So I didn't understand the reality of ethnicity in our body politic, which I now understand much more in much more greater detail now than I did at the time. And the reality is that political parties, particularly the liberation movement, are just an amorphous collection of different ethnic groupings.
But now, in retrospect, when you look at it, can you see how that could be perceived as?
I can see the perceptions, but it was not the reality that I lived in at that time. I was just doing my job.
So
honestly.
So let me ask it in another way.
I never asked, and have never asked anyone the suffix of his national identity card. Are you an R4?
Let's get to this rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay. No, I want to ask in another way, because it concerns business. There's another argument, because this is what was happening in cabinet, and these are just allegations and arguments. But you're here, and you've got the mental acuity to actually help us to debunk or to deconstruct some of these arguments. So there's an argument that argues that says this, that if you're a businessman, for example, and you come from a particular tribe, your issue, if it's presented in cabinet, can only be presented by a particular godfather who's from that particular tribe or region or clan. Otherwise, it cannot be supported by anyone else. Is this true? Was this from your experience? Do you think there's weight to it, or there's absolutely
up to 2013? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. That didn't happen. That was an issue. But I have to say that the Second Republic, so-called, has brought the issue of identity politics to the center of our politics, and I think it's regrettable, and I think it's unacceptable.
So, but would you not say Mugabe? There's the allegation again that Mugabe, it was a very Zezuru. Look, we are only talking about this so that we can actually deconstruct it and we can help our society move forward. But there's an argument that Mugabe was very much tribal, and he was just not, out there with it, but it was very much the undercurrents of his cabinet and of his bureaucracy was Zulu.
I think that he was a creature of tribalism.
Okay.
Because nationalism was, but I think because he knew the destructive element of tribalism, he then tried to, at any given time, incorporate various ethnic groupings in his Politburo or Central Committee. So he then tried, perhaps without success, to have some ethnic,
balance. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about another interesting bit. Indigenization. So you guys come into government of national unity. There's pump and fanfare, and people are really excited. Investors are coming in. I remember there was in 2010 there was a mining indaba, and suddenly there's a bombshell dropped by Minister Xavier Kaskwere at that time, and he says, you know what, we have an Indigenization Act and we're going to implement it. That put a damper on everything, everybody. What could you just maybe walk us through exactly what happened, what was going on during that period? And
the Indigenization and Empowerment Act had been on the shelves for a long time. Mm-hmm. And the first minister of India was in fact Munyarazi Paul Mangwana. But no one had acted upon it. So 2010 is now a big issue. Empowerment regulations are now on the table. The sad thing about the empowerment issue was the politicization of the program, because in the packaging, there's no country in the world that can fight a program of affirmative action to help disadvantaged communities and the disadvantages.
So can I push back a little bit there on just philosophically, because I'm not a fan of affirmative action. I think that I think that we can't ignore history, and it's a fact that certain groups were disadvantaged and suffered and were harmed by policies, of a particular period. But I think the question when it comes to affirmative action and programs like indigenization or in South Africa, Black economic empowerment, is what X are you trying to solve for, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes perversely, the people that you want to help actually suffer the most from some of these programs. So if you look at BE in South Africa, it's created a new elite of these incredibly wealthy Black business people, but the guys at the bottom of the food chain who were in abject poverty when apartheid ended in 1994, they didn't benefit in any meaningful way from BEE. If you look at land reform,
so you are now talking about the quality of the program.
I'm saying,
but the principle, in my opinion, is unquestionable. Take for instance, a program of affirmative action that says that
women should be admitted into university.
Yeah, we need to recruit women and make sure that in any faculty, women should be at least 30% of the faculty.
I think that would be a horrible program.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying that there's nothing wrong in trying to.
So
let me come to our empowerment, our indigenization program. If you are going to have a program that says we want procurement to be local in some areas. We want, if you're going to invest in this country, we want you to have upward linkages. They do this in other countries. Build a university, build a road, invest in the community, and so forth. That's empowerment. But ours was marketed as an asset grab, purely grabbing 51%. But when you looked at the act itself, it was much, much, much more than just 51%. So so the argument was that, look, we are marketing it incorrectly. But a program of empowerment in a country where 79% of the population is living in extreme poverty, it's not questionable. You can't question. I know you don't like it, but you can't.
So it's not so much that I don't like it or I like it. Right? It's for me. I look at it dispassionately from what outcomes are you going to get. Okay, so I feel like the outcomes that you get from programs like BEE, indigenization, affirmative action, they benefit a tiny elite. But if you have turbocharged free market capitalism, like what China had for 30 years, right? They managed to move 600 million people out of abject poverty.
I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think in the long term, what will liberate economies like Zimbabwe is a strong, functional, inclusive, economy. Yeah,
okay.
That's what will help us. But there's nothing wrong in the government or the state giving a helping hand to disadvantaged, communities to try and catch up.
Let's hear him out so that because what we're more interested in is the history.
Yeah,
I'm interested in you suddenly reconcile with Gono because previously you were enemies, but suddenly on this issue of indigenization, we have Biti and Gono as big proponents of supply chain, that we are against the idea of indigenization at the top, but we are very much for indigenization within the supply chain of mines or whatever. But on the other side, you have Minister Kaskure, who is pushing this idea of indigenization. We want you to give us color, what actually was happening within cabinet, how this thing was evolving, and why did you actually succeed at the end in ensuring that this thing never sees the light of day?
Well, it did see the light of day. It did prevent a lot of money from coming in. I was in the market at the time. It was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. So just give us.
No, I think as I'm saying, the issue became over politicized, and so whatever merit was in a program of trying to uplift a disadvantaged generation, a disadvantaged community, was then dwarfed by the noise coming from the politicization of the program, and it got so shrill that the program then laid the foundation of its ultimate demise, because it was sold on a wrong matrix that we are grabbing 51%. But empowerment surely can't be about grabbing 51%.
But you see, we use these wonderful words like empowerment, like affirmative action. What it really is racism, where the beneficiary is what were people who were harmed previously by racism. It's just a different form of racism. It's just a different way you label. You say this group is the oppressor, that group is the oppressed, and we're now going to redistribute between the two. And I can understand it from a justice perspective. I can understand it from the noble ambition to uplift people. And if it worked, I would support it 100%. I'd say, this is the best thing. But it's never worked anywhere in the world that it's been tried.
Your problem now, you are now being purely
pragmatic,
an academic economist. I would start with the land reform program. I don't agree with the massive extraction that took place from 2000, but I believe in the land reform program, because there is no way you can have a situation where 90% of your best land is occupied by 6 or 8% of the population. It will create an implosion. So you need to reform. You need to deal with inequality. South Africa is a sitting time bomb at the present moment because of the huge chasms, because of the huge levels of inequality. It's one of the most unequal societies on the continent, with a Gini coefficient of almost 1. It's unequal. So they have to deal with inequality. Land reform had to be addressed. I mean, I was writing a paper the other day where by 1907, the Pioneer Column and the British South African Company had acquired 31 million acres of land in Zimbabwe, literally in 7 years, because the land concession was signed in October of 1898. By 2020, they had 51 million acres of land. That's a recipe for a disaster. So you need to address inequality. And by addressing inequality, you need to address these things that are so emotional to the ordinary average person. They were the basis of the liberation struggle. So with empowerment, I think the greatest empowerment that should be given to anyone and everyone is education. If my parents, and I think it applies to the three of us here, if my parents didn't send me to school and I'd been lucky to go to Koromon's high school, I'd probably been dead. So that's empowerment, the massive redistribution program of schools that took place after 1980.
Okay, gentlemen,
you can't question that.
I think that so on the ideology, because today is not about ideology, and I don't want
just
to
give us 2 minutes to get into the.
No. Remember, we will, and he will always come back, and we'll get into the ideologies. But right now, what is very important is I want to deal with the issues around the GNU. These were real issues.